So I spoke to 21 women in tech sales mid-career, and my biggest finding was that they've constantly found they had to prove themselves, almost like having a snakes and ladder board. The ladder's not always been accessible, the snake's often being very accessible.
Welcome to Scale Sessions, the podcast that helps revenue leaders like you boost sales and revenue to achieve business growth within the trenches insights.
We can skip the fluff and focus on real-world strategies you can use right away.
Each episode brings you actionable takeaways from sales and revenue leaders navigating growth challenges like you. Let's dive into today's session and scale up your success.
Sim Riordan is a commercial director at Reward Gateway. With a background in psychology and behavioural science, Sim combines people-centric leadership with commercial strategy to drive sustainable growth. Sim, welcome to Scale Sessions. Sim, you've got a really unique blend of commercial leadership and psychology expertise, and you actually studied psychology at university.
Yeah.
What drove your passion in that?
So actually, it was a profound experience when I was 11. I met an educational psychologist who helped me realise I'm neurodivergent. So I have dyslexia and dyspraxia. And that was like a really life-changing moment for me. I really struggled with times tables and found reading quite hard, although I actually quite enjoy it and I'm good at reading, but maths has always been a bit tricky, and also telling the time. So that was a really important moment, and I thought, that's incredible. Like, I'd love to be that lady and change people's lives and help like kids learn better.
Wow, we were talking before we came on air about going to private school. They told you at 11.
Yeah.
I never got told, and I left school and I had the same.
Really? So when did you find out?
Oh, I'm still working it out. But yeah,
it's a superpower.
Yeah, channeled in the right way.
Yeah.
It's amazing though that they didn't pick it up at primary school.
Yeah, really interesting. So yeah, that was what sparked my interest. And then I studied psychology, and I realised, and I spent a lot of time in special needs schools supporting children to sort of build up the CV.
Mm-hmm. And
then I kind of realised, actually, I think
how's your passion for behavioural science influenced the way you run sales and account management teams?
Yeah, so obviously I think about behavioural science from different angles. So both kind of how you can support people to make really good decisions. So within a sales process, how do you architect and make it easy for someone to kind of go through that decision-making process, but also from an internal colleague perspective. So actually, how can you make sure that you set up an environment where people can thrive and that you can kind of bring both accountability, but also psychological safety through, and all of those elements obviously linked to behavioural science. I think I happened upon sales, which was a very happy coincidence because obviously it's incredibly important. And we use things like Cialdini's principles of persuasion to kind of anchor and think about, how are we supporting a client to make a decision here? How are we helping ourselves also to make things easier from a process perspective?
I don't know what Cialdini's principles
No, I'd love to know more about this and how much of a change was that for the sales team to start bringing this in?
Yeah, and I've got them here because I can't always remember them. But it's really around how we coach people, actually. So we work with an organisation called Lavery at Reward Gateway Eden Red, and we kind of audited our whole decision-making process and customer journey to help identify kind of areas of, I guess, cognitive dissonance or sticking points. So things that just kind of grated on or made for a more difficult kind of confusing experience for a client, and how we can simplify that. So it's definitely sort of work in progress for us, but more generally when we're coaching our teams, we'll use references to things like social proof or consensus buying, or how can we make sure that we support someone to feel like reciprocity in the connection with us, for example.
Were there any real aha moments when you went through this process with the sales team?
Yeah, I mean, loads. Unfortunately, you'd love to say like, oh, there were just a couple, but it was really clear, and it still is clear. We're still working on our go-to-market, that there's lots of different areas of where you can make it quite confusing for a client. You can give them too many choices. You can give them too little choices. You can phrase things in certain ways that just make it harder to say yes. And so a lot of it was around just rejigging the wording of how we're positioning something. And we don't use scripts or anything like that, but it's more kind of mechanisms for people to go, yeah, that's important, or what is my anchor point here? And we've really focused in on social proof. So you'll see on our website and all of our social media, got lots of client case stories, lots of community-based conversations, because that's so important for people, especially in today's environment with decision making. People are very risk averse, and actually where you can see your peers have done something similar, or you can see a similar organisation, it really helps you to buy into that as well.
It's really interesting because I love Rory Sutherland, and I think he tells a great story, but it's always in the D2C space or generally. And often you think about behavioural science in more of the B2C buying process.
Yeah.
But we don't really talk about it in B2B, but it's still people.
Yeah.
It's really strange, isn't it?
Yeah. Interesting.
When we spoke to you before, you mentioned that commercial success starts with doing the right things with the right people. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So personally, what I mean by that is making sure that you first of all, recruit the right people into the organisation for the purpose that you have for them, but also then you support them to develop and grow, to meet the expectations you have. And so there's all sorts of things that go into that. Of course, getting the right people in the room is key to that. So ensuring that you've got a diverse selection of CVs, you've got the right decision-making process and people in the mix of that as well. Nothing more unappealing, perhaps than like a female candidate going into a room or a process where you only meet guys.
Yeah.
Maybe you do the walk through the office, you see no one that you can personally identify with. That's not very helpful. So some of those things are what I mean by right people, right place.
How do you get the pressure of in any sales environment trying to hit targets and numbers with their personal development and well-being?
Yeah.
So
the tightrope.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to balance the two. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a balancing act, right? And most commercial organisations are not charities, so you do need to really strike that balance. But I think it comes back to having really clear accountability and goals, and then also being clear about what kind of safe space you have, and also then where the expectations come in. So within the teams I run, we try to encourage people to really own where they're at, and not everyone wants to. Not everyone wants to show up with their full self and bring it all to work, and that's absolutely fine. We respect people's space with that, but there's a level of accountability that people have with the things that are required for the role. We've got very flexible working environment, and there are certain things and rituals that we will, absolutely will stand by.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because the old school approach would be leave your SHIT at the door.
Yeah.
Do your job and get it done.
Yeah.
And then you want to understand if people have got other insinuating circumstances going on in their life. Because how do you help them do that? But there's a balance between, people just being focused and being able to get on with it.
Yeah,
I think
it's also trust, isn't it? And you need that trust. What are some of the rituals that you stand by? I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, different rituals. So personally, in our current setup, we have an all account management meeting on a Monday, and that's a really important space for us to all show up and talk about what's going on, what are we hearing from the market.
Is that always in person?
No, it's actually always online. Most people aren't in on a Monday.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might want to be, but most people aren't that keen to do it. And actually having it online makes it quite inclusive, because we've got colleagues all over the country, in different countries as well. And then we'll recognise also great work in that moment. It'll be, perhaps some great feedback, or it might be some great attainment in terms of objectives or revenue. And we'll all share stories there, which is really important. And then we'll do that across different team meetings across the week, which is really helpful.
Like a learning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Learning space. And obviously, depending on the size of the group, there's different levels of ability to share those things as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. We have something on a Monday, and it's, a lot of meetings through the week, you can talk about metrics and numbers and performance.
Yeah.
But are you actually sharing what happened in the previous week? What are you learning? What's going on?
Yeah.
And people don't often get that space just to kind of talk about that. So you can have meetings that have different meanings.
Exactly.
A lot of time people just type the KPIs and numbers all the time.
Yeah, which sort of is the same drum over and over again. So it's nice to switch that up. The other thing we do is in our onboarding, we encourage people to add a kind of recognition moment in their diaries on a Friday. And so because we have our own recognition software, that's what we sell, it helps us remember to do that. And it's an accountability moment. Even if you don't end up sending an e-card or whatever it is, you kind of remember, I should make sure I say thank you to that person. It made a big difference.
So every Friday you have a mention in your calendar, recognize someone for something great they've done that week.
That's up for me. I won't get around to it every week, but I'll store them up and I'll just do loads.
Yeah, that's really
and
nice.
It's helpful, and it's actually a great way of shining a light on hidden work that you don't always see, because I then get notifications about people in my teams, and it's just the loveliest thing. Like,
oh, that's great. So you're seeing who else is being
it's their recognition of other people, but I'll also see how they're getting recognized.
Do you?
Yeah, we use it. It's, they're like e-cards.
Yeah.
But we generally have them linked to values.
Great.
It's course they're built to when I was at Royal Gateway, right? So you have to use it.
But that shows how effective it was that you brought it here. I just wanted to go back to hiring the right people and making sure you've got a diverse group. You said something about, all the sales pressure, and I think particularly in sales teams, often when you're needing to hire fast, it's like, right, we need to have a diverse array of CVs, different backgrounds, goes out the window. How do you get that balance of, like, we need to hire fast, but we need to make sure we're hiring the right person and we're getting the right balance of CVs through? Because sometimes it can be a lot of work to get that.
Of course, and it depends on the infrastructure you have and also how much time, of course. But I think if you're using an agency, you can and you should be really clear. If you want to have balanced gender, just because it's the easiest trait to sort of talk about, and you have 10% of CVs only that are like 1 in 10 CVs is a female, like your likelihood of actually hiring a female is extremely low.
Oh, yeah.
So where you're using a recruitment agency, obviously it's really important to be clear and push back and demand more. And I think that's probably where, if you're working with an in-house team, even better. Where it's you sourcing yourself, that's a bit more tricky, but that's then when, posting different LinkedIn groups and going to different areas, those people that you're after hang out is really helpful. And I think that's also where you need to be careful with referrals. Referrals are brilliant, but often people are friends of people that are similar to them.
Yeah, that's
and so you can see that kind of perhaps like get in the way of having an inclusive working environment as well. But of course, you need to hire the best person, in the room. You just need to make sure you've got the right people in the room to even have a chance to be able to get the right balance. So I think it's really important to make sure that you've got very safe spaces with your management team. So one-to-one connection points, and where you're genuinely actively listening. It sounds silly, but you've got a private space to talk, because sometimes that's really challenging if you're in a scale up or, squishy office situation. And we definitely had that recently because we had outgrown our space. So it was actually really hard to find private spaces to meet. And so then it's being mindful, well, we won't be able to speak in person privately, so should we do that one remotely, or let's go out for that connection time? But it's then, phones away unless it's about note taking, because that helps you all, pay attention and actively listen, and being really genuinely engaged and being clear about what we're talking about, what kind of support the person needs. And I think there's also a piece around having structure. So people like and benefit from an element of structure. So being clear about when we're going to be talking about performance, when you're going to be telling me about your business updates, and I'll ask some questions, and then it's time for the tables to turn. So having a kind of rhythm within a meeting can be very helpful as well, especially within those one-to-one connections.
Yeah.
And how do you get a team to open up? Because some people may be a little bit more reticent, especially if they've been burned in previous roles, to actually share how they're really feeling.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't force people, and you never should, because that would be unnatural. But I think part of it's just being quite transparent about the kind of leader you are. And I try to be quite transparent with the kind of leader I am, the background I have, my interests and what I care about. And that generally is helpful for people to know contextually. And it means that, especially because I'm relatively open about some of the things I've been through in my life, I mean, most people are quite happy to talk to me about things.
So sharing first, showing vulnerability.
Exactly. But, of course, it's not, we're not here to have group therapy right at work. We're here to meet objectives, of course, have fun on the way and make it a really rewarding journey. So there's that balance as well, which I think is important to strike.
Yeah. And you mentioned those conversations are like really important, like game changers. How would you tend to structure them consistently? How would you do that?
Yeah, so it depends what the conversation might be about. So, but say if it was, someone's having some difficulties, it's clear that they're not thriving right now. I would probably change the environment we'd have the meeting in, and I'd say, let's have this kind of conversation. The reason I'd like to have that kind of conversation is because I think there's something going on with you, and I've noticed that things aren't well. And I want to be able to talk about that and how it's then impacting at work and how we can better support you. So I think it's quite important to give structure around the way that you set up those conversations, and also be clear about the intent. It's very different if you're having, perhaps a performance and management type conversation versus is everything all right conversation. How can we support you better? And obviously one should always come before the other.
So setting the scene so they know exactly what to expect from that.
Exactly. And I think also sometimes people will just call you, or they'll definitely call me and sort of start talking about something. I'm like, can we just define, like, what is it you want me to do here? Are you wanting me to listen, or do you need me to help you? Or are you looking for answers? Do you have answers that you're going to give me and we can choose which one's the best? Or what is it you need?
Such a great way to frame it. And also so you don't dive in thinking, right, I just want you to actually I just want
this conversation.
Yeah.
Or it's a rant. Okay, I'm fine to listen. That's good.
You mean just label it almost?
Yeah, exactly. You're just being clear about what is it we're trying to do here.
Even like a weekly one-to-one, how would you structure that? Would it be consistent? Like, how would you do that?
I'd love to say it's consistent because that's the best way to do it. But often, BAU goes everywhere. But typically with my one-to-ones, we'll have a recurring kind of hit list of things that we'll cover. So it'll be around performance, people, perhaps like business cases or particular clients' situations that we're working through. And then maybe there'll be like special projects that we'll touch on. And then within that, we'll sort of go everywhere, naturally. I think it's important to have conversations that's quite natural, and you go where the most important stuff is, and then everything else might get covered another time. And then we'll have semi-regular kind of quarterly, how's it going, based on our overall objectives conversations as well, which are just a bit more structured because we've got, KPIs and objectives for the year.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued that you use personality types and psychometric testing as part of your leadership toolkit.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about how you use that, because I think they can be really valuable, but also quite dangerous if you get put in a box.
Yeah. So it's an important tool because it's based on science, and a lot of leadership is intuitive and not necessarily kind of taught. And so actually I use these tools to sort of help give a common language and a common understanding of the things we're working towards. So first of all, I think even more important than psychometric testing is having kind of a behavioural framework of some sort that you're looking at. So we talked earlier about values. That's brilliant, especially where they're behaviour based. But having common language that you're trying to recruit to and also develop to and then coach to is really, really important, because people then know where they stand, and it allows them to make reference to that in conversations in the company as well. And then how do I use those tools? How do I use kind of behavioural science on that level? In recruitment, it's really helpful as long as you're using a trait-based assessment rather than something that puts you in a box, which is less helpful.
Yeah.
That's really helpful when it comes to development or team building, because it allows you to simplify, and have common discussions.
Like an insights one.
Yeah, insights or something that helps you identify, I'm a driver and actually you're amicable, and that means sometimes we might clash, but actually we work really well together in these instances. How can we then communicate in an effective way? So it gives you good common language to help broker and understand each other better, and then work better in a team. But in an interview process, it's really helpful because it helps you dig a little bit deeper in the CV and get beyond perhaps like first impressions and bias, and really go into the detail of the things that you're looking for rather than making assumptions.
So which tools do you really rate, and any that you absolutely hate?
I don't hate any, but obviously it's important to choose something that's science backed, because otherwise it's essentially like a horoscope, which has its place, but perhaps not in the workplace, or certainly not at distance.
We're just not compatible. That's what we're
exactly. You're a Leo and I'm no. So the things that I'd recommend are looking at trait-based assessments for recruitment and selection processes, and then you could definitely use type assessments like MBTI, for example, or insights or strengths finders within your development processes. The ones that I love to use within recruitment are there's something called the occupational personality questionnaire, the APQ, and that's really science based. It also allows you to look at lots of layers within a person. So
I don't know this one.
yeah,
I'm gonna check it out.
so it helps you. You can have a sales lens, you can have a leadership lens, and you can also simply look at universal competencies. And there's a framework that goes with it. So if you're a startup or a scale up and you don't have your own behavioural framework, and you're thinking, oh my God, that's another thing to do, you can literally find it for free online. You can use it and it plugs into the assessment tool, which is really helpful. And it's got interview questions. Again, they might be a bit corporate, but you can just kind of get the flavour of that and adapt it.
So somehow you've also managed to fit in doing an MBA, I have no idea how, and a thesis exploring what it takes for women to thrive in tech sales. What did you discover about the biggest barriers that women face? And also, how can businesses actually help dismantle them?
Yeah, big questions, obviously. I'll try and give a short answer, but no, really interesting. So I spoke to and interviewed 21 women who are women in tech sales, mid-career. And my biggest finding was that generally across all of the different careers they've had and all the different industries within tech, was that they've constantly found they had to prove themselves in lots of different ways, sort of micro ways, macro ways. And it was quite a consistent feeling of almost like having a snakes and ladder board. The ladder's not always been accessible for them, and then the snakes often being very accessible.
Oh, that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah. Got a visual that goes about afterwards.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And how do you think, is there anything you think you learned from that women can do or like companies can do to help and support women through that process?
The thing that I found most interesting, so I was looking at how women thrive and what are the barriers to thriving. And one of the biggest findings I had was, generally speaking, women are very able to move on and forgive and be kind of progressive in the way that they look at mistakes or missteps that a leader has. So, for example, a leader might, their manager might say something that's quite biased or make a decision that was an oversight and not have considered everything. And as long as there was the opportunity to have a dialogue about that, and actually that the manager took ownership of it or corrected that thing, they were generally quite able to thrive and they felt more included. But where it was just not that kind of climate, it was a very difficult thing because there was not the ability to talk about it. Perhaps the leader didn't even really care that was something, and they were either biased in an open way, or it wasn't a dialogue that they could have. And so that was a really important kind of element that I saw come through. And I think one of the most important things that, clearly isn't going to be a surprise is parental leave is obviously a big talking point within women's careers. It's also a massive point of inflection as to kind of whether women can kind of continue to rise or not, and actually how that's treated and the kind of mentality around that is really interesting.
I think it tends to go where we spoke to loads of people, isn't it? It goes one way or the other. People kind of settle and go, I've made it this far, or they come back and kick on.
Yeah.
And really go for it. It doesn't seem to be much of a halfway house.
Yeah, interesting.
Given you're expecting your first in a couple of months, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, probably quite apprehensive. It's a weird thing to have a break for something like this. It's essentially a new job that you've never done before. You don't know if you'll like it. Sounds very expensive and painful. I'm obviously really excited, hopeful for the next chapter. But for me, stepping away from work is a big wrench. I get massive FOMO and I love my job. And so that's a really interesting balance. And I can imagine that, it's a whole new identity, right? And I've interviewed lots of women that have gone through it and explained to me how they felt. And I think there were some really important things that they had shared with me around the way that they were kept in touch with on their terms and how included they felt, but also then how they were ramped back in. And especially within sales, of course, there's a lot of relationships, there's targets to hit, there's high pressure, and it's like starting again, but you don't really have the starting again hat or whatever you wear if you really started. So it's really important to kind of know how and what that looks like and the journey that ends up happening to ramp back a new parent, I guess. And that is both men, women, and everything in between.
Quick fire questions. That's how we will finish off. Yeah. Cool. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career, Sim?
The biggest lesson I have learned is that if I'm not really passionate about the mission I have and the thing that I'm involved in selling, it's quite tough for me to be motivated and excited. I have to really feel it.
Good tip.
I like that one.
What book or podcast would you recommend?
I absolutely love Difficult Conversations and How to Have Them.
I don't know this one.
Yeah,
Ooh.
it's a great book. I think it's based on Harvard Business Review research, and it's kind of subtitled as How to Discuss What Matters the Most. So it's about kind of how people come at different things with different perspectives and how to then move past quite an emotionally tense situation to actually being able to have dialogue.
How do you switch off after a busy day at work?
I absolutely love exercise. So I'm a big weightlifting fan. I love reformer Pilates, yoga.
Yeah.
Just get me into a class with someone, a kind of safe space of an hour and just doing something active.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
So I love chatting to Sim. So interesting getting that mix of sales, commerciality and psychology.
I felt calm talking to her. Do you know what I mean by that? It was just very very a tone of voice, a pace, very level, and you can see how that transfers into leadership. But with her background and all the psychometric testing, you can see how she's really thoughtful about having a conversation and how she labels the conversation, which probably allows people to open up. Yeah, that's what I really took away from it. Yeah.
I think it's such a smart way of really understanding what somebody wants from a conversation, but also to make them stop for a second and think, well, what do I want? Have I come to you because I'm just really angry and I want to shout about something? Have I come to you because I want to tell you what I think and get confirmation? Or is it actually that I want some advice or to work through a problem? And I think often we'll make an assumption like, oh, okay, you need me to support here, whereas actually they just want to talk something through and have their own recommendations. So I think when you know that up front, it can really help you as a manager leader know how best to respond to it.
Yeah, and even not always in podcasts that people say when they got something wrong, but she's talking about owning it with a team. She's got quite a big team there, and she missed one team. And that thing about being able to speak up and say, oh, this didn't go right and I didn't do that right. And then people understanding and being more empathetic to it. So she gave a great example there.
So important. I was working as a fractional with a company where the CEO hadn't celebrated one particular team at their all hands in January, and they were still upset about it in May. It really does cause scarring. And I think if he just said, right, I messed up, but
like we talked about, once your money is where it should be, salary, everything else, that just becomes the normal. And if you're not being rewarded and recognised in the right way, that becomes almost the most important thing.
That's what means the most, isn't it? And that's what we keep, those little e-cards or little notes saying, thanks for this, I really appreciate it. That's what you keep.
Memory boxes. Thanks for tuning in to Scale Sessions. If you found today's insights valuable, be sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Stay connected for more no-nonsense advice to help you scale your business, drive revenue, and achieve your growth goals.